from Dante Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So the big question is, how does Canelo Alvarez get rid of his David Benavidez problem? And it seems like it's getting harder and harder because I don't know if you guys know this, but David Benavidez is the #1 contender for the WBC belt, which means he's Canelo's next WBC mandatory. And this is the reason why now it's time for David Benavidez to start putting tremendous pressure on the WBC and Canelo Alvarez to take the fight. He needs to start aggressively calling out Canelo. He needs to force Canelo to either take the fight or vacate. I don't think David realizes he's in a very powerful position right now. I mean, he has almost as much power as Caleb Plant has right now, because we know Canelo desperately wants that 4th belt so he can call himself undisputed. I mean, Canelo, he doesn't care how much money Caleb Plant wants. He's pretty much willing to do almost anything to get Caleb Plant in the ring. But we're going to talk about what he's not willing to do later on in this video. But back to David Benavidez. David needs to continue to apply the pressure on Canelo Alvarez. Once again, David Benavidez, he was the champion at 168 until he got stripped. You see, Canelo Alvarez, he did the same thing to David Benavidez that he did to Demetrius Andrade when he was fighting at 154. A lot of people don't know this, but Canelo was Demetrius Andrade's mandatory. And Andrade, the champion, was calling out Canelo. He called Canelo a bitch. I mean, I played the clips many times for you guys. Canelo still did not take the title shot. All of a sudden, Demetrius Andrade, he gets stripped of his title. They give the title to Liam Smith. And then all of a sudden, Canelo Alvarez, he's willing to fight for that title, which was the WBO belt. You fast forward to present day, at 168, David Benavidez is the WBC champion. David Benavidez is the most dangerous fighter at 168 before Canelo moves up. All of a sudden, David Benavidez, he gets stripped of his title. Now, all of a sudden, Canelo Alvarez is willing to fight Avni Yildirim for his belt. This was such a mismatch to DAZN that this led to DAZN forcing Canelo Alvarez to face better competition, or they're going to give him a pay cut. And this is when Canelo decided to break out of that contract, because he wanted to be able to fight as many European and Eastern European fighters as he wanted to. So now Canelo Alvarez, he's trying to get the Caleb Plant fight so that he can get all 4 belts and become undisputed. But he's running into a couple of problems. The first problem was money. It's funny how Canelo, once again, he says Demetrius Andrade wants a payday. It turned out Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, and Caleb Smith and Kovalev, they all asked for more money when Canelo offered them a fight. In fact, all of those fighters I just mentioned, they actually turned down a fight with Canelo because they wanted more money. But Canelo wanted these fights so bad, he came back to the negotiation table. He was willing to pay them whatever they wanted. He didn't care if they wanted a payday because he felt it was a guaranteed win for him. So when Caleb Plant said that he wanted a whopping $10 million to fight Canelo Alvarez, a lot of people were like, oh man, Canelo, he probably ain't going to take this fight if he has to pay this man. But you got to remember, when it's someone that Canelo Alvarez feels is not on his level, for some reason, he feels they're actually worth paying more money to. So giving Caleb Plant $10 million, that wasn't the biggest problem for Canelo. Remember, Canelo, he gave Billy Joe Saunders $8 million, and he gave Caleb Smith $6 million. But the biggest problem, the biggest hurdle, was Al Heyman telling Canelo Alvarez, if you want Caleb Plant, you're going to have to sign a 3-fight deal. And we pretty much already know who Al Haymon wanted Canelo Alvarez to fight. It would have obviously been David Benavidez, Jamal Charlo, and maybe someone else. And to no one's surprise, Canelo Alvarez, he turned down the offer. Now, I want you guys to think about this for a second. Let's just say Canelo, he hadn't already beat all these European fighters at 168, and they were all PBC fighters. Billy Joe Saunders, Smith, and Abdi Yildirim, right? And he wanted, let's say Canelo, he wanted to fight one of these guys. Al Haymon told him, Canelo, if you want to fight Yildirim, you're going to have to sign a 3-fight deal, which means you're going to have to also fight Caleb Smith, BJ Saunders, or Caleb Plant. Do you guys think Canelo would turn down that offer? Of course not, because those are the guys that he already wanted to fight, right? When it's really crazy if you think about it, because it should be the contrary. My point is, this offer should have been right up Canelo's alley if he wanted to really be the best, right? They did some boxing polls that had over 100,000 votes asking, who do you want to see Canelo Alvarez fight next? Now, this was before Charlo had fought Montiel. And do you know the majority of fans said they want to see him fight Charlo? So Al Haymon is giving Canelo an opportunity to fight the one guy who's been chasing him for 6 years, the one guy who Canelo Alvarez vacated his belt for at 160. He's giving him an opportunity to fight this guy in a huge payday. There is no downside to this offer other than the fact that Canelo could possibly lose. And that's to either David Benavidez or Jamal Charlo. We know both of those fights would be huge. We know for a fact both of those fights would be far more successful than any of the European fighters that Canelo Alvarez has faced. Just to give you an example of the numbers that Canelo does when he's fighting against a black fighter in general. I remember when Canelo was fighting on HBO, he fought against a washed up James Kirkland. And that fight on HBO, it was on regular HBO. That was one of the most viewed fights of the year on regular HBO that year. And this wasn't even a Jamal Charlo. So once again, when these Mexican fans try to say, oh, you know, Charlo is a bum and Andrade is a bum, well, what would you call James Kirkland? And last time I checked, Mexicans, they loved that fight because they knew that Canelo Alvarez had a very good chance of winning that fight. James Kirkland had already been knocked out before. He was towards the end of his career. He had no chin anymore. Every time he got touched on the chin, he either staggered or he was on the canvas. And that was before he fought Canelo, right? So we know what time it is. It's so crazy when you think about the fact that once Canelo gets past Caleb Plant, the most meaningful fights available for Canelo would be either David Benavidez, Charlo, or Demetrius Andrade. Those are the fights that make the most logical sense. Those are the most viable opponents for Canelo Alvarez. And here Al Haymon is offering him those fights. How do you justify turning down an offer like that? So Canelo Alvarez is telling the boxing world he doesn't care who we want him to fight. He's going to continue campaigning as the best pound-for-pound fighter against European and white fighters. Something else I really can never understand when it comes to Canelo Alvarez and Mexican fans who defend this behavior. I've already told you guys many times, as Don King put it, race sells in the sport of boxing. Every time Canelo Alvarez fought against a black fighter, he did really, really good views or pay-per-view buys, right? Statistically, 95% of the greatest Mexican fighters have suffered their first loss to a black American fighter. That is a statistical fact. So my question is, why wouldn't Canelo, when he was asked by Brian Custer, why don't you want to fight David Benavidez? And he said, because he's Mexican and we're from the same country, right? So if you feel that way, why wouldn't Canelo want to go out of his way to fight the black American fighters, avenge some of those defeats? Some of your favorite Mexican fighters, you've watched them lose to black fighters. Why wouldn't you want to go out and make up for that, avenge those losses? Floyd, you guys keep saying that Canelo is doing everything that Floyd Mayweather did. Floyd Mayweather made a career fighting Mexican fighters, some undefeated, some 15 years younger than him, some 20 pounds bigger than him, and he beat them all. So my question is, why wouldn't Canelo want to do the same thing from the opposite end of the spectrum? Go after all the best black fighters, from the ones 20 pounds bigger than you, to the undefeated ones, to the more experienced ones. The same thing Floyd Mayweather did, right? Why won't Canelo do it? Floyd Mayweather never just went on a European tour. Floyd Mayweather fought Mexican fighters and champions on their own holidays. Not only is Canelo not fighting the best black fighters today, he's also not fighting the best Mexican fighters. And we know when it comes to great Mexican fighters like Julio Cesar Chavez, Barrera, Morales, they took on all comers. The best black fighters, the best Mexican fighters, so on and so forth, right? But you're telling me Canelo is not willing to do this? Or he wants to wait until the coast is clear before he comes outside, wait until the storm goes away, and it's an easy walk in the park? In other words, wait until these fighters start to fade to where they don't look the same anymore, to where they look extremely beatable? Is that what Canelo is waiting for? Canelo should have took this deal without Heyman, because him taking this deal would have gave boxing fans the fights that they really want to watch. Instead of Canelo just saying, I don't care what you fans want. I'm going to keep taking these easy wins until I retire. Hopefully that's not how this plays out. I do believe eventually Canelo is going to be forced to step in there with tough competition. I've already told you guys, if you notice Canelo's pattern, he usually fights soft competition for a good 2 or 3 years, and then, like the Olympics, every 3 or 4 years, he'll fight a really tough opponent, and then he'll go back to fighting soft touches for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Hopefully that's not the case right now. Hopefully DAZN and promoters and the boxing world will force Canelo to get in there with tougher competition. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
Hello, my name is Dominic. I just got my procedure done here at South Carolina's. I was recommended by Dante's Boxing Nation, and it's real. Here's the results. The brother out here, Brother Enoch, is real, and it's a very, very, very good recommendation. I recommend it. 4 hours, you in, you out, and it's the rest of your life.
So if anyone in the world wants this hookup, make sure you contact my man Enoch at 704-499-3471, and make sure to follow him on Instagram. Check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, then this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called Elo Diki Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to elodiki.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram.